The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back, in case you're wondering, with George Case. And George is here to introduce a terrific panel, and we're going to talk a little ball. George Case III, how are you?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the introduction, Ralph. Now, I wanted to mention one thing. We're going to have a discussion about Jimmy Piearsall, and before we do, I'd like to just introduce the people on the podcast. Alan Blumkin, Alan is on with us regularly. Dacid Hubler, David and I had worked together. David had a book that he wrote a few years ago, Nats and the Grays, a terrific book about Washington baseball during World War II. And Ronnie Rabinovitz out in Minnesota. And Ronnie, before we even start on Jimmy Piearsall, I just wanted to, first of all, congratulate you on your working with the youngsters on Jackie Robinson and the various programs you do. It's terrific. And
thank you, George.
My pleasure. And I also wanted to mention the other day we had a conversation about Paul Molitor. You weren't with us. You were, I believe, out at Drake University. But
right.
Molitor was let go by the Twins, and I'm just curious as to your opinion and what the Minnesota press has said about that, because it sort of took everybody by surprise. He had done what we thought was a very good job in Minnesota, and they let him go.
Absolutely.
So what was your...
We were all surprised. George, we were all surprised. Last year he was manager of the year, and this year they fire him. They were very surprised. We all were. He was very well liked by the players, very well respected by the players. And I have a feeling that he's going to get a job in the front office. I don't think they're going to let him go completely, but it was a real shocker. I thought he did a good job. I thought he was a great manager. And
the reason we were asking you, Ronnie, we were curious because, that was our impression. I mean, Molitor, Hall of Famer and really a fairly young guy. And,
right.
after that one really great year, and then all of a sudden, what have you done for me lately? And they let him go.
Yeah.
So it was sort of a difficult situation. We talked the other day, and you weren't here, about, a lot of managers, they'll be let go, after bad seasons and all that kind of stuff. But, the Twins had been a contender, and like we talked about, Molitor had been the manager of the year before.
The year before, right, exactly. So everybody was surprised and shocked, actually. I certainly was, because I thought Molly did a great job, and it wasn't his fault. They got rid of half the team. I mean, they said Escobar, I think isn't he with the Diamondbacks, and Dozier's with the Dodgers, and I mean, they started unloading all their players. So I don't understand it. And I think that right now that Chad Levine and his partner, they're a little bit on the hot seat right now, but we'll see what happens.
Now, Ronnie, what was the justification? Did the Twins make any kind of an announcement as to the reason for making the change?
No, they didn't. They just wanted to go in a different direction.
Right.
And I think Molitor was there before these two guys came in. The guy, one from Cleveland, the other from Texas. And I think maybe they wanted their own guy. Now, I don't know.
That sometimes happens. When you have a change of the regime at the top, they want to bring their own people in. Many times it is if a manager is a friend of somebody, they'll bring that guy in. But in the case of Molitor, it was somewhat strange.
That's how Casey Stengel came to the Yankees.
Yeah,
what's that?
Very popular.
Yeah, because Bucky Harris was hired by McPhail. When George Weiss took over, he wanted his own man, which was Casey Stengel.
Right.
Yeah. It happens quite often with managerial changes.
It happens quite often, yeah.
Yeah.
It happens.
Well, you said you think Molitor is going to stay with the Twins organization?
I believe he will. He's a great judge of talent. And I don't know what position they would put him in. I don't know if he still wants to manage. I've heard rumors that he still wants to manage. So everything is kind of up in the air yet.
Right.
But it was a shocker here, I'll tell you.
Well, I appreciate your comments, Ronnie. I just wanted to ask you before we get into the discussion about Piearsall, because it's something that just happened within the last couple of weeks, and we certainly wanted to get your opinion, since last week we did discuss it and you weren't on with us. So I appreciate you talking about it. Now let's change the direction a little bit, and we're going to talk about Jimmy Piearsall, and I've got some personal stories and some personal opinions about Piearsall. But before I get involved, I'd like to have Alan or David or Ralph or Ronnie, talk about Piearsall, because certainly he is a controversial figure in Major League Baseball. And, Alan, do you have some thoughts on
Piearsall? First of all, the Fear Strikes Out movie was not quite in the class of the William Bendix Babe Ruth movie, but it was pretty bad. And Piearsall hated it. He especially hated Anthony Perkins playing him.
Right.
But the only thing that probably came out of that movie was that I'm sure Alfred Hitchcock saw Perkins and all the mannerisms he displayed in that movie and hired him for Psycho. But I remember when I was watching Yankee games as
athlete. Had he been a better athlete, it would be great.
Yeah,
there were some scenes where he was showing his absolute desperation in response to his father's tormenting him, and he played those scenes very well. In uniform, in baseball uniform, not so much so.
Not so much, no.
Yeah, the thing that I remember about Piearsall, as a kid, when I was 10 years old, 1953, I was his first year back from his, hospitalization, and he was playing right field. This is the year before the Red Sox got Jackie Jensen from Washington and moved Piearsall to center field. And Piearsall was making catch after catch after catch in right field, and he became pretty famous for that. He just took a lot of hits away. It was all over the place. And, then he had a great year. And then a couple of years later, when the book, Fear Strikes Out book, came out in paperback, I read that because the first awareness I had of him was he had a card in the 52 Bowman set. And, in those days, who is this guy? And then the book came out a couple of years later, and I read the book a couple of times, and I found out what happened to him, and how he overcame it, and the father put enormous pressure on him. And the snapping point was when the Red Sox said that they were going to try to convert him into a shortstop, and they sent him to Birmingham, and that's when he had the breakdown.
Because he always played the outfield, didn't he?
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was.
Alan, I had read that about trying to convert him to a shortstop, which really, I guess, did set him off, because Jimmy was was really an excellent outfielder. That was his whole background, and good speed, good arm.
Right.
So try to convert him, and with his fragile mental situation, I guess that certainly would. I wanted to make a couple comments, and I will in a minute, about Fear Strikes Out, because I happen to agree wholeheartedly. I always thought that Anthony Perkins was a great actor, but as an athlete, no way. I mean, to me, he was totally miscast playing Jimmy Piearsall as a ball player. And that's all I'm going to say on the subject right now. But David, do you have some thoughts on Piearsall?
Actually, I remember seeing the movie as a kid, and I kind of liked it. I like any baseball movie up to a point, just to see them play. Yeah, I remember Piearsall actually came to the Yankees for a brief bit, and I don't recall too much about him being there. I do know that just about everybody who knew of him knew that he was having mental problems. It sort of went along with his. If you knew what Piearsall played the outfield, you knew Piearsall had mental problems. and because he displayed them all over the place. Today, some of those things probably would have passed for, clowning or getting in the umpire's face, but he stood out in an era where ball players played it pretty straight. I mean, in one case, I remember he came to bat wearing a Little League batting helmet. Well, in those days, nobody wore a batting helmet. Now it's mandatory. So maybe, maybe there are some things that he
might have been a visionary.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He instituted some things in the game too. So, it was a sad story. I didn't realize he had died just a year or so ago, but I guess it was in June or something. But fighting with Billy Martin really ensures that you're nuts. That'll send you to the funny farm. Right.
Well, Piearsall, was really, and I just read recently, I think he'd been diagnosed as having mental exhaustion or something. I think that today it would be referred to the research of being bipolar.
Yes, that's right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy was a tremendous athlete, and he'd been a great high school basketball player as well. He was very high strung, but he would flip out on occasion, and today they would say, well, he's bipolar, and he would be able to treat him and that kind of thing. But back then, I agree with you, David. He was sort of what they would call a flake in baseball terms.
I remember in the book
he would do things. I mean, there was stories that he went and hid behind the monuments in Yankee Stadium, and he talked to Babe Ruth, and he ran the bases backwards after hitting a home run, his 100th home run, and he would do crazy stuff, and yet his talent as a ball player was wonderful. I mean, he had good speed, good arm, a good hitter. And it was just one of those unfortunate situations where he was, considered having some mental issues, and when in fact it might have been a bipolar condition that could have been treated if it was known today.
Right. It's interesting that he gave the Red Sox such fits, and yet they've inducted him into their Hall of Fame.
That outfield, that he was a center fielder with Williams in left and Jensen in right, was about as good an outfield as there was in baseball in the late 50s. And he later played in an outfield with Minoso. He was in center. Minoso and Colavito was in right with Cleveland.
Yeah, with Cleveland,
Cleveland, yes. Mm-hmm.
So if you look at his career, he played on some terrific teams.
Yes, he did.
Get by the mental stuff, he was quite a ball player. If you over that era, that 10 years, but he was nuts as can be. And even after he retired, Peter Golenbach told a story. I don't know if you were on that show, Alan. Where he talked about years after he retired, Piearsall attended a fantasy camp. Now, teams will put these on. They'll get a whole bunch of players who are retired and campers. The public will come in. They fit you with a uniform. You spend a week training and playing games and inter-squad games. And the old players, the retired players, are the managers and the coaches, and you really get to bond with your heroes. And sometimes it's co-ed, as it was in Peoria when they invited Jimmy Piearsall to be part of the program and entertain the campers. Well, middle of a game, there's a woman playing shortstop for Jimmy's team, or team he managed or coached. And these are all middle-aged folks, just trying to have a good time. And it makes me laugh, but it's not funny. Somebody hits a ground ball to the woman, and instead of throwing to second, or he throws to first, or whatever. She just makes a mental blunder. He comes out screaming at this woman. I can take errors of, you make a mistake. That's one thing, but a mental error, I won't stand for that on this team. And he calls your names that absolutely derogatory in every way. They had to come out and get him and take him to the clubhouse, dress him, put him on an airplane home. That's
how bad it was.
And that was later in life when he wasn't playing anymore. So,
Ralph, I had never heard that story, and it wouldn't surprise me. But the fantasy camps, I'm well aware of. I had a lot of friends who went, and they thought they had a great time. Matter of fact, my good friend Jeff Torberg, he was coaching a Dodgers fantasy camp down in Vero Beach quite a few years, and it's always a big thing. Another friend of mine, I ran into him one day at a post office, and he said, "Hey George," he said, "did you see my baseball card from fantasy camp?" And so part of what they do for the campers is to give each camper a baseball card of them in uniform, which is is obviously a big thrill for the camper. But I had never heard that story, and that certainly it's not surprising to me. But on the other hand,
no.
That poor girl at shortstop, she had to be mortified that Piearsall would do that.
They comped her the whole week, as a matter of fact.
I would think so. Jeez.
Sounds like a good Billy Martin story, too, actually.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned Vero Beach, and it comes to mind that right now, Vero Beach is being hit with these horrible floods. And good thing there's no climate change. Well, this country would really be in bad shape.
Well, you know what, Ralph? Now that we have Ronnie with us, and Vero Beach was the home of Dodger Town, and Ronnie, you might want to comment on that, because that's where really the Brooklyn Dodgers were way ahead of their time. I mean, they brought all their organization players to train at Vero Beach over the years. It was a terrific opportunity for them. And Ronnie, have you ever visited yourself or talked to anybody?
Yes, I did.
Part of Vero Beach? Okay.
I was there the last year they were there. And it was beautiful. I loved it. That Jackie Robinson way and Roy Campanella corner and all the others. It was just terrific. The history there was just phenomenal. And I used to have in Sheboygan, there was a ball player by the name of Joe Hauser.
Oh yeah.
Hauser. You ever heard that name?
Oh sure, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a minor league. He had 69 home runs one year in the American Association.
That's right.
I know he came to the A's for a few years, and he broke his leg, and that was it in the majors, and he went back to the minors and did very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a sporting goods store in Sheboygan, and every year I would go there and visit with him and sit for hours talking baseball. He was just the greatest guy, and he would always participate in the Dodgertown camps in the summer, the exhibition, spring training. And I'd go to the store, and his brother-in-law would be running the store because he was gone. And I said, "Is Joe home yet? Is he?" No, he wasn't. So as soon as he got home, I'd rush down there and talk to him, and he told me Jackie said to be sure to say hello to me. And he had this little corner of his mouth, he had this cigar, never lit, but just a stub of a cigar in the corner. And I'd come into his store and, "Hey, champ," he'd call me, "Hello, champ," and we'd talk baseball for hours. He was just a fascinating guy. I just loved him. And quite a guy. So
well, Ronnie, when you went to Dodgertown, I've never been there, but I think they had it set up, didn't they, with a multiple number of baseball fields that they'd be playing and working out at the same time?
Oh yes, absolutely, multiple number of players. Right. It was an old Navy, I believe, some type of a service facility, And
they used the barracks from those.
They used the barracks for their homes. That's
yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah. But they turned it into a beautiful field, and I was sorry to see the Dodgers move west. I mean, it made sense because being in L.A., with having fans come into Arizona, and they have a beautiful facility in Glendale, Arizona, which is terrific. But they share a camp with the Chicago White Sox there.
Now, Ronnie, do you know, we talked a couple of weeks ago about Branch Rickey. Was Dodger Town, was that his creation, or was that done
Yes,
after
it was.
he was there?
No, it was his creation. Yep.
Okay.
He was a genius when it came to baseball. He really knew his stuff. And,
all these training devices that he had, these cages,
yes,
the swings and what have you. He was indeed a genius.
He really was a baseball genius.
Innovative guy in baseball history, I would say.
Absolutely. That was a magnificent place.
Yeah, as an aside, one year Casey Stengel when he was managing the Yankees, they had multiple diamonds where they were in spring training. He calls out a bunch of names and he tells one of the coaches, take these guys over to the other diamond. I want to see how they play on the road.
That's a great story, Alan.
That is funny. That's so funny. Yeah, they were the first ones to do this. And it was, the minor league players and the major league players would intermingle, and they would. It was great. It was terrific.
Yeah, I believe. Ronnie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the Dodgers, when they did that, they brought all the organization, all their farm clubs,
all the
together, right?
The minor league teams and the major league team, absolutely.
Right.
Everybody intermingled there. Yep.
And they had
because that was far different from what they used to do. They used to, the major league clubs would train, and then they would break camp, and then the minor league clubs would come in.
Right.
They
had
really
all
train together, right?
Which was smart because it was good. The young kids could get some knowledge from the older guys, the guys that are in the majors. Campy had a corner, a little place where he sat, and he used to talk to all the catchers in the whole minor league system. It was called Campy's Corner,
right?
And he would put on seminars there about catching.
In the 50s, probably around 57 or 58, the Yankees had a Campy's Corner. They brought Roy in after he was tragically
the Yankee camps.
This was a between games of a doubleheader. They had a Campy's Corner.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a TV program. Yeah.
He'd say, "This is Roy Campanella, folks, and hoping the day is going good for you." He was the most mellow voice.
Yep.
You really couldn't help but cry every time you saw him. When an athlete loses his motor skills like that, it's horrible.
It was very sad, very sad.
Very sad.
Yet it didn't, it didn't let him stop him. I mean, he in the wheelchair. He used to go always to Dodger camps and talk to the young kids. And he was terrific. Yeah. He was so knowledgeable of catching.
And that's the one nice thing I can say about O'Malley is that he did take care of Campy.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
He had that big event at the Coliseum where they
that was terrific.
And everybody let him match.
It was the largest crowd for a baseball game. I think it was over 100,000 people.
Right.
At the Coliseum. Yeah.
Proceeds went at least partially to take care of the O'Malley
it's
family,
medical.
of course. And,
right.
And then Campy.
He survived 35 years after that accident.
You what? I'm sorry, what?
He lived 35 years after the accident.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Well, I think Ronnie and David and Alan, I think that Campy was severely injured in that automobile accident right during really the peak of his career, wasn't he?
No, he was on the downside. He was 36.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, and what happened was he was driving home. He had a liquor store. He was driving home, and there was an ice patch. His car skidded and overturned, and the rest we all know.
Right, but he was.
I tell you this from teaching traffic school. This was before seatbelts. I taught traffic school.
Yeah, he was 36 years old at that point.
But he was still playing, right? He had the
last year in Brooklyn in 1957, and then he was obviously after the accident he was unable to move with them out to Los Angeles.
Right.
Right.
Were there seatbelts available in those days?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't think so. I know I was driving at the time. I can never remember, no seatbelts, no car seats, no anything. You had your children, you stuck them in the back seat. That was it.
Well, the auto industry said it would cost too much to install them, and it would raise the price of a car too much. The auto industry is notorious for claiming everything. Any safety feature is always too expensive to put in until they put it in, and then nobody hears about it again, except that it's a good safety feature. Right.
Yeah. The bibliography to that is anything Ralph Nader ever wrote.
Yeah.
Another guy who would have survived his tragic accident had he been wearing seatbelts that were available at the time was Billy Martin, who
Well, they were available. That was 1989.
They were, yeah.
He was in a truck, and him and the guy who was driving, who survived it, were both, shall we say, alcoholically impaired.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think that happened. I think it was a Christmas Day.
Christmas Day, 1989. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, back then, and, you mentioned the seatbelts were available, but they certainly weren't. I mean, there was always a big discussion, you're going to wear your seatbelt or not wear your seatbelt.
They weren't mandatory at that time.
Yeah, today it's almost, a given because they have all the, click it or ticket or whatever they call it, and everybody uses seatbelts. But back then when it happened to Martin, I can recall those years. I mean, a lot of people never wore seatbelts.
And I'm not sure what
and the argument was that you didn't want to be trapped in a burning car. The status.
Pickup trucks were.
The pickup trucks. You're right, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a cheery conversation about baseball players.
Now, one thing I remember about Piearsall in his book, he wanted very badly when he was in high school to play football, and his father wouldn't let him.
Right.
So he was holding the yard mark. That was as close as he ever got.
Yeah, he was from Waterbury. He was from Waterbury, Connecticut, and he was. I did a little research recently. He was a high school basketball star. I think his high school team won the Connecticut State Basketball Championships or whatever. I mean, Piearsall was a very, very talented athlete who did have this situation inside his head. And when I met him, I happened to meet him in '62 when he was playing for Washington, and my dad was the Senators' third base coach. And then I think it was the next year, and he was very pleasant to me, very, very nice and quiet, and hadn't did anything crazy when he was playing for Washington that I recall. But I do remember the next year in '63. I went to a ball game, Yankees game, Washington game at Yankee Stadium. I was in the front row right by the Washington dugout, and Piearsall, came over to me, and they said, "Hey, George," they said, "I remember you. You're George's boy, right?" And I said, "Yeah, Jimmy, thank you very much." So, the people I was with said, "Oh my gosh, Jimmy Piearsall." I said, "Well, he remembered me from last year." So, I had very good memories of Piearsall, but my whole thing with Fear Strikes Out when I saw it, and I've always been a proponent of I enjoy baseball movies if the athlete is being portrayed as an athlete. And to me, Jimmy Piearsall being portrayed by Anthony Perkins, who was totally unathletic, a great actor, but just not an athlete at all. Right. And to see that really turned me off when it came to the movie. I watched it because I was interested, but to me it just didn't hit home because it was so unrealistic.
Yeah, it was like Gary Cooper playing Gary.
Kevin Costner.
He was no athlete. Gary Cooper didn't know
Costner was
baseball
a
to hold.
You know,
so
he had a better idea of
that.
But the William Bendix and the Babe Ruth story is a standard bottom for me.
Yeah.
Now you have to see Goodman in the Babe.
Babe Ruth has a record for most bad movies made about a ball player, and it's 3. There's one with Nathan Lane also.
Himself. He was in
all terrible.
Bad movies.
Yeah.
But the Babe Ruth one, the William Bendix one, which was the only one out for quite a long time, was the first time I saw that, my jaw dropped several times.
Yeah.
Popcorn flew out of your mouth, right?
Yeah.
Hey guys, can we talk about
Jackie until I came
who was
to Goodman
mentioned
movie.
Once or twice, once by me, I know. And there was a guy with a little mental problem, much like I have, a fear of flying, and it cost him his career.
Jackie Jensen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe David can talk about him.
He was good. I was glad to see when he joined the Yankees, but a couple of seasons later, I mean, it all came out because he just couldn't get on an airplane, and so that
was in 1960.
Career ended very, very quickly.
He quit after 1959 when he led the league in RBIs for the 3rd time. He was the MVP in the American League in 1958. And then he decided to come back in 1961 when they expanded to, the Twins moved to Minnesota, got the Twins, and they brought in a new team in Washington, and the Angels came in. And until the A's moved to Oakland, the Angels were the only American League team in California for 7 years. So they fly out there and then they play a series and fly back, to the east of the Midwest.
Right.
But he was an excellent ball player. The Yankees
took a lot of trains, even.
The Yankees. They were overstocked in outfielders, and in May of 1952, they traded him for in a package for Ralph old buddy of Noren.
Right.
And Jackie spent a year and a half in Washington, where he wasn't all that great, and then they traded him to Boston for Mickey McDermott, who had picked off Tom Yorkie's wife by she was trying to console him. He didn't know who she was. She tried to console him after a loss, and he said the F-bomb. Yeah. So Gene Yorkie told Tom to get rid of him, and they put in Tommy Umflett, who had succeeded Don DiMaggio in center field for 1 year, and they packaged Umflett and McDermott, and they sent them to Washington, and they got Jackie Jensen. And Jackie Jensen, came into Boston, and they moved Piearsall to center field, and Jackie Jensen became one of the top players in the American League for the next 6 seasons.
Well, Alan, you mentioned Jackie Jensen, and just like we were talking about Piearsall, Jackie Jensen was a tremendous athlete.
Oh yeah.
I think he was an All-American football player.
California.
He was great.
You're in Berkeley, where I live.
Yeah. And he definitely did have a fear of flying. That was something that really shortened his career. And at the time, he was married. I don't know whether you guys knew this, but he was married to Zoanne Olsen, and Zoanne Olsen was an Olympic silver medalist in diving. And my dad met her, and as a matter of fact, I've got a photo in my office of in 1954. President Eisenhower invited many athletes, DiMaggio, Rocky Marciano, my dad, and Tris Speaker, Clark Griffith, and so forth, to a luncheon at the White House, and Zoanne Olsen was there. And I believe at the time, Jackie might have been playing for Washington. This was 1953,
Yeah, they played there that year. That was
he with Washington then? Okay. So I guess that, maybe that Jackie couldn't make it or whatever, but, Zoanne was there, and she was, an Olympic. She was a terrific athlete herself. And but Jackie Jensen, with all his great ability, that fear of flying really ended his career, quite early. And it was a sad thing, but that was his personal. He did not want to fly. He did not want to be away from his family that much. And, it just, he decided on his own, I've had enough in this, and I'm going to retire.
He passed away fairly young age of 55 from a heart attack.
Oh, did he really?
1982, yeah.
Yeah, he could have been playing in the era of taking trains between the cities, and he might have had a longer career.
Yeah, but he retired after 59 when the furthest point west in the American League was Kansas City, and then of course he came back in '61 for one final year. As I mentioned before, they had to go to LA a couple of times a year to play the Angels. And they were the only team. They were the only team, that far west for 7 years. So after '61, they had to fly back and forth Los Angeles to wherever several times. So that really did him in.
Right.
Did he fly or did he take the train? Or he just
fly LA from Boston?
Yeah.
He wasn't going to fly.
No.
And that's what did his career in.
Yeah, and he missed 1960. And then he tried to come back in '61, and his skills of the road somewhat.
Any other stories about Jimmy that you guys can think of?
Go ahead, Alan. I just wanted to
the White Sox
mention.
He is.
Yeah, he was He was an announcer. After his career, and I'm not sure how much if he carried on in the broadcasting booth, but certainly I think if Jimmy today, I mean, they would be able to treat him and probably, but back then, I mean, that was 40 years ago.
They didn't know what it was.
Well, George, he actually lost that announcing job because he was too critical of the White Sox. They fired him.
Oh, is that right?
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And Tony La Russa.
Out there in Chicago, what's his name is one of the world's great Homer announcers. Played for the White Sox.
Harry Carey or Buck?
Oh no, he played for the White Sox. He's still there. He's
Ken Harrelson.
Harrelson.
He just retired. Yeah.
Yeah,
he's 77 now. Yeah.
He was biggest homer you can imagine. I mean, it was always the good guys and the bad guys, the guys with the white hats and the cap, although the White Sox always had a black cap, but they were still considered the good guys by Harrelson. It was, and so I guess they've always had to maintain in the Midwest. They've always been accommodating to homers as announcers, but Piearsall, I guess, went just too far, and they finally.
Well, you hit upon that. He inspired Tony La Russa and Dave Duncan, his coach, to come up to the announcing booth, whatever he said, Piearsall, with a baseball bat. They were going to beat the hell out of him with a baseball bat. So he did have a way of turning your head, Jimmy Piearsall, whatever.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, he came out to Oakland, and he spent a year as in the booth out here as an analyst. I think Bob Rush was the announcer at the time, and they made an LP of that year that he appeared on. Now it would, of course, be a CD or whatever, but it was an actual record of the A's experience. I think it was 1972, their first year of winning the championship. So he did make some enemies, but he made some friends along the way. Again, a terrific ball player.
Yes, he said he died of Parkinson's disease.
Oh, did not know that.
I didn't realize that either. Huh.
May he rest in peace. And
Yeah.
guys, it's been a good show as usual. Just basically just talking ball is kind of fun. I think I can get an agreement from you guys.
Yeah, as long as you we stay away from what's going on now.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just talk baseball, talk sports.
Yeah, 4-hour games. The Red Sox game was 4 hours last night, and the Milwaukee Dodger game was 4 hours the night before.
Oh, I thought you meant.
No, Trump and them. No.
Well, we can talk about that too. But Ronnie, I'm curious when you talk about when Alan mentioned the Dodgers, you got to be pretty happy right now. You look. What's your prediction? Are we going to have a Dodgers World Series?
No,
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. It's going to be tough.
Hey, Ronnie, I can tell you this was the first year in my baseball fan life that I didn't root against the Dodgers in a key game.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You, Peter Trunk, Linda Wilson, Bernie Rose.
Yeah.
I know
and
Fred
Peter Trunk.
Guys on our station that are absolute. Robert Cole is a Dodger fan.
Yeah.
Claire Hall is a Dodger fan on the
she
station.
is.
I have some of the Scott Russell's a friend of the shows on all the time. These are not just Dodger fans; these are historians. I have assembled a bunch of folks who really give some good Dodger talk on this station. So,
did you mention Doris Kearns Goodwin? She's a big Dodgers fan.
Very much so, yeah.
But she hasn't been on this station.
Well,
my main concern is that Houston beats the Red Sox.
She wrote a book. I mean, she's a presidential historian, and she wrote a book about her childhood. I think the title was "Wait Till Next Year."
Yeah,
and it was all about the frustration of being a Dodgers fan.
Right.
And that was the title of that book. And there was also, if you're out there listening for books to get, there was a book entitled the same thing, Wait Till Next Year. And it is basically pictures of New York City baseball from the late 40s to the early 60s. And it is terrific.
Christopher Janison.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have that book, yeah.
It is that not a
from 47
book?
through 57. Most of those books are cut off after, right after the Dodgers Giants leave.
Right. Well, this one in particular.
Yeah, I have it. Yeah, I know. I have it autographed. It came to one of our regionals a bunch of years ago.
Jennison did. Yeah,
one of our regionals about. God, that's 1991. This was.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, because I did a presentation on the 1954 World Series with the Giants swept Cleveland because the Reds had just swept the A's in 1990, and which was considered a huge upset. So I did a whole workup on the 54 World Series, and I presented it at that meeting.
Well, Jennison did another book about the Yankees in much the same manner. So if you're out there and looking for something that is not only a good read, but some incredibly rare and poignant pictures of these guys. And New York City baseball, Giants, Yankees, and Dodgers. Wow, great memories. Good time to grow up as a kid.
Yeah, there's also a book I want to recommend. It's sort of like The Boys of Summer. It's called The Miracle at Coogan's Bluff. It was written in the 70s by Thomas Kiernan, and he discusses the entire Giants 51 season. And in the back, like Roger Kahn in Boys of Summer, he has chapters on almost all the key ball players on the Giants that year. I don't think it's generally available, but a lot of Amazon's back dealers carry it, and I just was able to pick up a second copy for $8.
Nice.
Yeah, but it's a very good read.
Beautiful. And thank you, gentlemen. We'll be back next week. I hope and pray.
Same bad time, same bad channel.
Thank you, Al.
See you later.
Okay,
thank
you, everybody.
Thanks, Ronnie. Thanks, David.
Okay.
Yeah, go use
We're over and out. Comfortably Zoned.
The Red Sox.
Network. Best baseball talk ever. Adios, guys.
Bye-bye. Talk to you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. This has been a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.